Have you ever looked back at a toxic relationship and wondered, how did I not see it? Not because the signs weren't there, not because you were foolish, but because somewhere in your upbringing, your mind learned to call dysfunction normal. Sometimes the biggest red flag isn't the toxic person. It's the part of you that was trained to feel comfortable inside emotional chaos. In this video, we're going to talk about the subtle ways people are conditioned to ignore warning signs in relationships, especially in cultures and homes where survival, obedience, silence, and endurance were praised more than emotional safety. By the end of this video, you may finally understand why certain behaviors never alarmed you, why unhealthy love felt familiar, and why your instincts often went quiet around toxic people. 1. You are taught that love requires suffering. Some people grew up watching women especially being praised for endurance. The woman who stayed no matter how badly she was treated was called strong. The one who tolerated disrespect was called patient. The one who kept sacrificing herself was called a good woman. So instead of learning that love should feel safe, mutual, and emotionally nourishing, you learn that love is something you survive. That's why when someone is emotionally draining, inconsistent, manipulative, or difficult, part of you interprets it as seriousness instead of danger because ease feels suspicious to people who are taught that suffering is proof of commitment. This is one reason some people leave healthy relationships saying they felt bored but become deeply attached to chaotic ones. Their nervous system mistakes emotional exhaustion for intimacy. 2. You are taught to prioritize being chosen over being respected. A lot of people were raised with one major fear: don't end up alone, especially women. So instead of developing standards, discernment, and boundaries, many people were conditioned to focus on one thing: can I keep this person? Not, is this person emotionally safe? Are they kind? Do they respect me? Just, do they want me? And once your self-worth becomes tied to being chosen, red flags become inconvenient truths your mind tries to minimize. You explain away disrespect. You over-spiritualize bad behavior. You become overly understanding because losing the relationship feels more terrifying than losing yourself inside it. 3. Conflict in your home may have desensitized you to dysfunction. If you grew up in an environment where shouting, manipulation, silent treatment, emotional inconsistency, or intimidation were normal, your brain adapts. Children normalize whatever they repeatedly experience. So later in life, when someone raises their voice at you, controls you, humiliates you, or constantly keeps you anxious, it may not immediately register as unhealthy. Not because it isn't painful, but because it feels familiar. And familiarity is powerful. Human beings are often drawn to what emotionally resembles home, even when home was unhealthy. This is why some people feel strangely comfortable with emotionally unavailable partners. Their nervous system has learned to associate unpredictability with connection. 4. You were praised for ignoring your feelings. Many children were raised to suppress discomfort. You're too sensitive. Stop overreacting. Respect your elders. Endure. Pray about it. So instead of trusting their instincts, they learn to distrust themselves. They learn that feeling uncomfortable doesn't mean something is wrong. It means they are wrong for reacting. And this becomes dangerous in adulthood because red flags rarely arrive with dramatic music. Sometimes they show up as small discomforts: a strange comment, a controlling joke, a dismissive tone, a feeling you can't explain. But when you've spent years disconnecting from your intuition, you talk yourself out of what your body already knows. 5. You confuse attention with love. People who are emotionally neglected often become deeply vulnerable to intensity, not love, intensity. Love bombing, fast attachment, constant texting, over-the-top promises, emotional dependency disguised as romance. The fact is that when someone gives you excessive attention after a lifetime of emotional starvation, it feels intoxicating. You don't pause to ask, is this healthy? You just feel relieved to finally feel seen. And toxic people often sense this hunger very quickly. They study what you lacked emotionally, then temporarily become the solution. That's why many people ignore obvious warning signs in the beginning stages of toxic relationships. The emotional validation feels too powerful. 6. You were taught that boundaries are disrespectful. In many homes, boundaries were interpreted as rebellion. Saying no was seen as prideful. Questioning behavior was seen as disrespect. Protecting your peace was seen as selfishness. So people grow up feeling guilty whenever they advocate for themselves. They tolerate things that deeply hurt them because setting limits creates anxiety inside them. Toxic people love this. They thrive around people who fear boundaries because someone who cannot say no clearly will constantly betray themselves to maintain relationships. Healthy relationships respect boundaries. Toxic relationships punish them. So if you are raised to fear disappointing people, manipulation becomes very effective against you. 7. You are taught to see potential instead of patterns. One of the biggest reasons people miss red flags is because they fall in love with potential. Potential is dangerous when it consistently overrides reality. You see who someone could become. You imagine the future version of them. You become attached to their trauma, their pain, their good side. Meanwhile, their actual behavior keeps hurting you repeatedly. Unfortunately, many people were conditioned to overextend empathy, especially if they grew up in environments where they had to emotionally care for the adults around them. So they become rescuers in relationships, and rescuers often tolerate what they should walk away from. 8. Chaos may feel more emotionally real to you than peace. This is something many people struggle to admit. Sometimes healthy love feels unfamiliar. A calm person may seem emotionally flat. A stable relationship may feel too quiet. Consistency may feel unnatural. Meanwhile, emotional highs and lows create adrenaline. If your nervous system grew up around instability, calmness can initially feel uncomfortable because your body has been trained to expect emotional turbulence. So people accidentally interpret anxiety as chemistry. Butterflies are not always a sign of compatibility. Sometimes they are a sign that your nervous system does not feel safe. 9. You learn to over-explain bad behavior. One major sign that someone was conditioned to ignore red flags is this. They always have a reason for why someone hurt them. He had a hard childhood. She's stressed. They didn't mean it. They're trying. Now empathy is beautiful. However, excessive empathy without boundaries becomes self-abandonment. At some point, impact matters more than intention. Someone can be wounded and still wound you. Someone can have trauma and still traumatize you. Understanding someone's pain should not require tolerating your own destruction. 10. Deep down, you may believe unhealthy treatment is what you deserve. This is the hardest one to confront. Some people were raised in environments where love was conditional, where affection had to be earned, where criticism was constant, where emotional needs were mocked or ignored. And over time, they internalized the painful belief, I must work for love. I must tolerate pain to keep people. My needs are too much. So when healthy love finally appears, it feels unfamiliar, even suspicious. But when someone disrespects them, neglects them, or keeps them emotionally unstable, it strangely aligns with the identity they already carry about themselves. Healing often begins when people realize this truth. You cannot consistently choose healthy relationships while believing you deserve unhealthy ones. The scary thing about conditioning is that it becomes invisible. You don't realize you're ignoring red flags because your behaviors feel normal to you. But awareness changes everything. Once you start recognizing these patterns, you stop romanticizing dysfunction. You stop confusing survival with love. You stop calling emotional suffering patience. And perhaps for the first time, you begin listening to yourself instead of your conditioning. Because the goal is not just to be loved, it's to feel safe, respected, emotionally seen, and psychologically at peace inside that love.